So a couple of weeks ago I started looking for games to play, and I stumbled across some print and play stuff, specifically on printandplayarcade.com. And I started printing some stuff out and was having a blast with a lot of the stuff, and I realized that many of the games I was enjoying are from a company called Button Shy Games. I discovered actually that Button Shy Games is from South Jersey, very close to where I grew up, so that was a little bit fun as well. But I've been trying to find out more about their games, and looking on YouTube, I noticed that there's not a whole lot of videos on a lot of their stuff. So I got some time while I'm stuck home during Corona, so I figured why not share some of my love of these games with some of you. And I thought maybe a good way to do that is to just start recording some of my playthroughs of some of these games. I'm going to start with a game called Food Chain Island. This is a game that's done by Scott Alms. You might know him from some of the Tiny Epic games. But this is the newest game by Button Shy Games that's being pushed on Kickstarter right now. If you like what you see here, I recommend you head over to Kickstarter and take a look. But yeah, so today I'm going to do a playthrough of Food Chain Island. All of the components I'm going to be using today, which is just cards, have all been printed myself. So it's basically just a piece of paper and a sleeve, and on the back I've just used some playing cards I had laying around. So these aren't going to be the actual cards you'd get in the game, but the artwork is there, and you should be able to get a good idea of what the playthrough looks like. Also, the rules are prototype rules. I don't imagine much is going to change, but some of it might change, and I can't guarantee that I won't make small mistakes along the way, but we'll do what we can. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the game. To set up the game, there are 16 animal cards, because there is a card 0. And we're going to shuffle those cards up, and we're going to lay them out in a 4x4 grid. In addition to the animal cards, there are also 2 sea animal cards. These animal cards are going to give some special powers that you can use, some special abilities that you can use to help you out during the game. So I'm just going to lay these here off to the side. These are one use, and I'll explain them a little bit later when I talk about the rules of the game. So what is the goal of the game? The goal of the game is to move these animals one by one, up, down, left, or right, one space at a time, eating other animals until hopefully you're left with only one animal remaining. According to the rules of the game, you can have up to 3 animals remaining to call it a win, but for a complete great win, you should have 1 animal remaining at the end of the game. When I say 1 animal remaining, that should be 1 land animal remaining. The sea animals, again, are special cards that you can use to help yourself, but don't count towards the goal of the game. So again, the way that we play this game is on our turn, we're going to move 1 card up, down, left, or right to eat another animal. The rule is that every animal can only consume an animal that is 1, 2, or 3 numbers lower in value than the number on the animal that is doing the eating. For example, this 7 card right here could be moved to eat the 4 because it's 3 numbers below it. If we look here, the 7 can eat 6, 5, or 4. Same thing here, this 13 could be moved to eat the 12. This 5 could be moved to eat the 3. This 2 could be moved to eat the 1, and so on. And we need to move them one by one until we're left with 1 card. The twist is this. Each animal has an ability printed at the bottom of the card. When we move that animal, we must trigger the ability that's written on the card. Sometimes those abilities are going to help us. Sometimes those abilities are going to make things a little bit confusing. And again, it is those abilities that are also printed on the sea animal cards that are going to help me, hopefully, complete this puzzle. So let's get into the gameplay, and I'll explain things as I go. It may be hard to see some of the abilities, but every time I use one, I will make sure to explain what I'm using, how I'm using it, and so on. So give me a few seconds. I'm going to take a look at the board and see what we can do. I see down at the bottom here, I've got this row of 3, 2, 1. It may not be a bad idea to get rid of that, because if we have 3, 2, 1 and there's a 4 here, that's a nice pattern of things that we can get rid of. The only problem I'm worried about is the 0 that's up in this corner. Because if I get everything down to 4, that 0 is going to be a problem. There are some cards, though, that will let me discard things or break some rules. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to start by moving this 3. No, I'm going to start by moving this 2 onto the 1. The spider eats the ant, and the spider card says move 2 animals 1 space each. I'm going to move this 3 over here, and I'm going to move this 5 down here. So next I'm going to take this 3, the mouse, and eat the spider. The mouse says I can move 1 animal 1 to 2 spaces. So I want to bring this 5 closer so that it's set up for when the 4 moves on my next turn. So here we go. This is the point I was talking about before. We can remove cards. This lizard, number 4, is going to eat the mouse, number 3. And by doing that, I can remove 1 unstacked animal of my choice. So I'm going to remove this plant card because I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to get to that top corner with this low number. Actually, it wouldn't matter anyway. I lost my 3. There's nothing else on my board that can normally eat that 0. So then I think the next step I want to do is move this rat, number 5, to eat the lizard, which says 4. And now I get to move 1 animal 2 spaces. Let's see. I need to get that 5 closer to something. I'm going to try to move 2 spaces. See, this is where things get confusing, right? Because now I have to move an animal 2 spaces. And that may or may not help me with what I'm doing. So let me think about this for a second. I could move the polar bear 1, 2. No, that's 3 spaces. That would be 1, 2, 3. That doesn't help. Well, let's do this. It doesn't change anything. If I move the wolf up and over. I'm sorry, it's going to be off the screen now. If I tilt up a little, you can see it's still there. But that's okay because I'm going to use it on the next turn. So it'll come back onto the screen. So the wolf, 11, is going to then eat my lynx, which is a 10. And then after it eats, it can move 1 space. So it moves 1 space. I'll move it over here to keep it close to the other cards for now. So we need to keep shrinking and keep shrinking and keep shrinking. I want to avoid covering the bat for now. I really enjoy the bat card because the bat card gets to move wherever it wants to after it eats. But we'll see. I don't know if I'm going to be able to use that this time. Actually we might. No. All right. I may not be able to avoid that. Let's see what we can do. Alright, so let's just do this to get the board smaller. The raccoon eats the bat. 8 and 6, that's too different, that's okay. Now the raccoon says on my next turn if I eat an animal that's exactly one number below, I can discard an unstacked animal. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. This could be tricky. But let's do this. If I move this 13 here onto a 12, that triggers the raccoon's ability. And just because it's sort of out of the way, I'm going to lose this fox card. Alright, and we just used the gator. The gator says on my next turn, I move the eaten animal into the predator space. It means I'm sliding underneath rather than on top of. But we have a problem here. I could get the 13 to be eaten by the 15, right? I could feed the gator to the polar bear, sliding it underneath. But if I do that, I'm not going to be able to use the polar bear again. But also, the polar bear will never be able to eat anything else because the only high number then... unless we can find a way... Alright, let's try that. We're going to move the alligator under the polar bear, triggering the gator's ability. Now, the polar bear is eaten. The polar bear cannot eat again on the next turn. So let's try this. We've got a little bit of a problem, but that's okay. If I do this, the wolf eats the raccoon. Now the wolf has to move one space after it eats. I'm going to slide it in because that might hopefully help things out a bit. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to win here, but let's see what we can do. If I use the whale is going to let me move any animal to any other space. It's going to help me fill in this hole, and it might help things out a little bit. Let's see what we can do. So I'm going to move... The wolf can't eat the snake. But maybe it can. So if we move this here, with the whale's ability, and the snake eats the rat, I can swap the location. I can swap the location of any two cards. So I'm going to swap this 11 and this 14. Then I'm going to use the 15 to eat the 14, which means the 15 can't move on the next turn, but that's okay. Then if I use the shark says I can move any animal one space to eat, but it can eat an animal of any smaller value. If I use the shark, the wolf can eat the snake. But now we have a problem. And the problem is this. Now that I've done that, the wolf needs to move one space. If it moves one space, it's no longer lined up with the polar bear. And even if it was, honestly, the polar bear can't eat the 11. So we finish with 2 cards. It's a good win. It's not a great win. It's not perfect, but we did well. I hope you enjoyed this playthrough. I hope it shows you what the game is like and how it plays, and it sort of points out some of the unique abilities that each card has. And if you're interested, head on over to Kickstarter. There's still a few more days left on the project, and pick up a copy for yourself.